Path of Exile is one of the most fun and robust RPGs on the market today. It can, however, be a bit overwhelming for new and inexperienced players alike. If that's you, stick around because I made this video just for you. I'm going to cover the classes, the loot, the skill tree, the currency, and touch upon endgame for once you've completed the story. In PoE, there are 7 classes, 6 of which have 3 ascendancies, which you can think of as a specialization for the class, and the 7th is the Scion, which only has 1 ascendancy, which we will get to later. First up, the Marauder, a melee-focused class. The Juggernaut ascendancy is a tank focused on stacking armor and life. The Berserker focuses on raw damage output, and finally, the Chieftain focuses on doing fire damage by utilizing totems for both damage and survivability. Next up, we have the Duelist, another melee class. The Slayer focuses on offense and utilizes life leech for its survivability. The Gladiator focuses on a mix of offense and defense, mostly utilizing dual-wield one-handed weapons. The Champion is the tanky ascendancy, utilizing taunts and banners while stacking high armor and evasion. The Ranger is your typical bow class in the game. The Deadeye focuses heavily on offense by increasing projectile damage and speed. The Raider focuses on evasion, giving it very good survivability while still being able to put out really good damage. The Pathfinder focuses on buffing their flask effects, which greatly increases both offense and defense, and they are also great for running poison builds. The Shadow has 3 very versatile ascendancies. The Assassin is focused on critical strikes and poison damage. The Saboteur focuses on utilizing traps and mines, which have a very high damage output while allowing you to stay back out of harm's way. The Trickster focuses on high evasion for survivability and is proficient at damage over time builds. The Witch is a caster-focused class. The Necromancer raises the dead to do her bidding and keep the enemies off of you. If you've played a Necromancer in Diablo 4, you'll be very happy to play this build here, as the minions actually do damage. The Occultist specializes in curses and chaos damage over time. The Elementalist focuses on doing direct elemental damage and elemental damage over time. The Templar is your holy warrior class. The Inquisitor focuses on elemental damage and consecrated ground, which increases damage enemies take and increases your survivability. The Hierophant mostly focuses on utilizing totems and brands to deal out damage. The Guardian focuses on stacking armor and life regen, making it one of the tankiest classes in the game. And finally, we have the Scion. The Scion only has 1 ascendancy, called the Ascendant, because it actually pulls ascendancy nodes from the other classes in the game, making it the only real true hybrid class. Now, you cannot actually play the Scion at the very beginning of the game because you have to actually rescue the Scion from the end of Act 3 just before the final boss. I also do not recommend any new players actually play the Scion because they have a much more complicated build set, and if not played correctly will actually make the game a lot less fun. If anything in this video helps at all, please consider hitting the sub button down below. It's free, it really helps the channel grow, and I really appreciate every single person that actually subs to the channel. The passive tree is what generally overwhelms new players, and it is what caused me to uninstall the game the very first time I played PoE. It does look very intimidating, but it's actually very well done, and makes a lot more sense once you start to break it down. Here's the passive skill tree for the current league, pulled from the latest update to Path of Building, which is a tool used for creating builds and following along with other people's builds. As you can see, it's quite intimidating to look at, but now let's break it down into sections. I've color-coded them based on the stats of each region. So the top section is blue for intellect, the red section is for strength, and finally green is for dexterity. Now, as you can see here, there are these round wheels that are actually the starting points for each of the classes. The Witch is up top in the middle of the intellect region. Going clockwise around, we have Shadow next, that sits on the border between intellect and dexterity. Their build tends to tap into both stats. Ranger is next in the center of the dexterity region. Duelist on the border between dexterity and strength, and it greatly benefits from both of these stat trees. Marauder is in the center of strength region, and Templar is in the middle between strength and intellect. Finally, Scion is in the center of the passive tree, allowing them to branch in whichever direction they choose. The passive tree contains small passives, notables, and key passives. Key passives are these nodes off by themselves that are quite strong and can really make a build shine. There are also masteries that are unlocked once you allocate 1 notable inside of a cluster. If this is your first time playing Path of Exile, I would strongly suggest following a build guide on your very first playthrough of the game, and over time as you get more knowledgeable with the game, start tweaking builds and eventually making your own. There are plenty of build guides on YouTube, the forums, and sites like Maxroll and PoE Vault. I would suggest checking out a few and trying to find one that looks fun for your playstyle. There are many really good builds out there, and I will put a link to the two that are shown in this video in the description below. Now that the most overwhelming part is out of the way, let's dive into item filters. PoE drops a lot of items, and they allow you to filter out things that you don't want to see, as it would be a waste of your time to pick up everything on the ground and portal back to vendor it. There are two ways to install item filters. The first method, you can go to filterblade.xyz and download from there, or you can create your own once you get more experience with the game. The other method, which is what I prefer, is to add item filters to your account on the PoE website. I prefer this method because every time a filter gets updated, you automatically get the updates without having to download or update anything at all. Also, since it's tied to your account, if you get a new PC or if your hard drive dies and you have to reinstall the game, your item filters will be there automatically without you having to go back and re-download them. Currencies in this game can be quite confusing at first. Most of them are used for crafting, and if you don't plan to craft items yourself, you can actually sell them for other currencies such as Chaos Orbs and Divine Orbs. Now, Chaos Orbs and Divine Orbs are your primary currencies when it comes to trading for items in-game. Since there isn't any gold in the game, these have become the standard currencies. Now, if you think in terms of MMO currency, a Chaos Orb would be kind of like silver, Divine Orbs would be gold, and the top echelon of currency in the game is actually called the Mirror of Kalandra, and that would be equivalent to like platinum. Now, divines at the beginning of the league are generally worth about 80 to 100 chaos. Towards the end of the league, they're a little bit over 200 chaos orbs apiece. Now, cheap items will generally be traded with chaos orbs, and the really expensive endgame items are done using divines. Now, again, the top tier currency is the Mirror of Kalandra, but they're extremely rare to drop, and most players will never even see one the entire time they play the game. Now, once you've completed the story campaign, which is pretty straightforward, you will be finally introduced to maps, which is an item that you can place in the map device within your personal hideout and run repeatable content. It's a great way to farm up currency and continue leveling your character. This is what the atlas looks like. You start at the bottom and you work your way up towards the top as you complete connecting maps. Now, maps range from tier 1 through tier 16 and get progressively harder as you go higher and higher. Mapping is the core of the end game for PoE, as the current and many of the past league mechanics are located within maps. Now, there are some alternatives to mapping for the end game, but those will need to be saved for another video, as they can get very in depth and are going to take quite a bit of time to go over and fully explain. Alright guys, that is it for this video. This should have given you the information to hopefully keep you from being overwhelmed and make your first experience with Path of Exile a bit more enjoyable. Now, if you run into trouble along the way and you need a guide for anything in the game, just let me know in the comments down below and I will see what I can do for you. Thanks for watching. Bye.